thank you everybody for coming to the October meeting of the NEHS. Derek Gunn is going to be presenting Reptiles and Mythology for us, part 2. So go right ahead.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you everybody for coming and for your time. I did this talk in, I believe, in September of 2015, and then last month, maybe a few of you overlapped with this meeting, had some technical difficulties, so I just kind of improv some off the cuff stuff. But I hope today, with this presentation, you know, with a few pictures, that'll be even a notch better. I know that people seem to like some of the things I talked about last time, and I might go over some of them quickly because who was here last time? Let me see who. Okay, so majority of people were here last time, but there'll be some overlap, and there'll be some overlap with the talk I did in 2013. So I'm really excited to be back. I love this group. You guys are a great group of people, great society. So let's start. There's actually a lot of material. So reptiles and amphibians in folklore and mythology revisited, part 2. I actually yesterday and today was going over some of my notes and was looking into mythology and folklore. And the last time I had read something and it kind of gave a definition like folklore might be something they were saying like a Paul Bunyan story. You know, something that's, it's not real expansive, or there's a haunted house at the end of this road. That's folkloric type stuff. Mythology is usually a grander, more involved, intertwined system almost of things, like if you think of the Greek myths or the Norse myths. Yet, when I looked into it, one person said that mythology is sort of a subset of folklore. So when you use the word folklore, it's almost like the idea of all nickels are coins, but not all coins are nickels. So I guess mythology, from what I was reading this week, it gets complicated. I invite you to look into it a little bit yourselves sometime on Google or something. But evidently mythology could be considered a subset of folklore. But typically when we say folklore, we mean things more like the subset of folklore that I was saying, like Paul Bunyan kind of stories or ghost stories. And typically mythology involves deities, with gods. If you think I said like of Hindu mythology or Native American mythology or Greek mythology, it involves a complex system. Usually there's a kind of a spiritual component to it in the sense that there are gods involved or supernatural deities. Where folklore might not always have that. There might be tall tales like Paul Bunyan's Yay High, but he's not a god. So folklore versus mythology, and some of the things I'm going to show you, I'll show you fall more into one camp than the other, and some kind of obvious. So I thought maybe I would just go through the various kinds of amphibians and reptiles, like I did last time. So frogs and toads. Let's start with the amphibians first. Frogs and toads. What I noticed, before I get into details actually I should say, is what I noticed in my research for this talk is that reptiles and amphibians are very complex symbolically. Depends on what culture it's almost like bats. You know, some cultures think bats are, ooh, bats, you know, kind of evil. You go to China, they're like a good luck symbol. So reptiles and amphibians have the same type of thing in a lot of cases. It depends on where you are as to like how they're perceived. I think a good example too is like dragons. Dragons, you know, can be conceived as a very thing inspiring fear, or they're a good luck thing. Depends on where you are. So they have this kind of duality sometimes. And so frogs and toads are the same thing as the rest of them. In China, the frog is a symbol of good luck. And where we see a person on the moon, a face, in other parts of the world they see a rabbit. Some people see a rabbit and some people see a frog. In ancient China, images of frogs were found on the drums used to summon thunder and much needed rain. So you have this again, a water connotation symbolism, and the frog is associated with the yin yang. It's with yin. It's with the moon, and with female principles. So let's go to the next one. Now they have this really cool thing in shops and around the world. You see the good luck frog. He's a 3-legged good luck frog. He's like missing one leg or something, but he's they have these in, it's like a feng shui type thing. They have them in sometimes in stores, and I believe that Japan has also sort of used the same symbol. I'm not sure which place it started. I think it started in China, but it has to do with prosperity and stuff. So you know, frogs can kind of have a sort of an and we all love frogs here, I think, but some people have like a feeling of sort of repulsive creature, and yet in other parts of the world it's a very positive thing. So as I said, it can go either way. So something I got into last month here was this, you know, the frog prince, the princess and the frog, and we all kind of know this story. What's interesting to me is that Bruno Bettelheim, who wrote The Uses of Enchantment, interpreted this from a sort of psychodynamic, a sort of, I assume, sort of Freudian school. And it's really interesting how a tale like this can encapsulate so much. So, in The Princess and the Frog, right, she's a princess, she's out playing by a pond or something, and she loses her golden ball in the water, and she entreats this frog to help her get it out. And when he does, well, he says, if you do X, Y, and Z for me, I'll get the ball out of the water. But what ends up happening is after she gets her ball, she's like, yeah, right, she doesn't want to deal with the frog anymore. Well then, one of the things he said was, can I eat off your plate, can I sleep in your bed, and can I give you kisses on 3 nights or whatever. So, when he shows up at the castle, there's a knock, knock, knock during dinner, and they open the door, and oh, there's that horrid little frog, get him away. And the king says, well, did you promise all these things? Yeah, actually I did, Daddy, yeah. Well, get the plate, he's gonna sit next to you and you're gonna follow through. And so what somebody like, someone who studies mythology or psychology would say, is that these are sort of ideas like, she's like the id. She's that Freudian concept like, I just want what I want. She gets a ball, she's all set. The father's like the superego, your conscience, society, your parents telling you to do the right thing and stuff like that. And what's interesting is after she spends some time with him, he becomes very handsome, he changes into the prince. And what a mythologist might say about that is that young unmarried woman might be like, not so sure about the certain parts of being married and things like that. And then after you get to know somebody, they become beautiful, and things you're afraid of are actually a happy thing, not a scary thing. So it's funny how I say simple in quotation marks, kind of sort of a simple story is so coded and so embedded and works on so many levels. I find that really fascinating, and I wish I came up with that. That's Bruno Bettelheim. I didn't figure all that out. I kind of sound the same thing. In the tale, a spoiled princess reluctantly befriends the frog prince. Although in modern versions, the transformation is invariably triggered by the princess kissing the frog. This is kind of sick. In the original version, the frog's spell was broken when the princess threw it against the wall in disgust.
Oh,
right? Those Grimm brothers, right?
They were terrible.
It's terrible. And then what's really kind of cool is there's a Russian version, the frog princess, which I just learned this, it inverts the whole story. And it's just basically the opposite. So it's an enchanted female frog who becomes, you know, it just flip around the whole gender thing. One of the things probably some of you have heard of is falls of frogs and toads, falls of various animals.
Yeah.
And what's weird about falls of animals is that there's all these anecdotal things all through time, even recent reports, but it's very rare when someone actually, if ever someone says they actually see it happening. I mean, we have all these phones nowadays, people have phones in their cameras and video, you can do things. So it'd be interesting if we get some verification. But I should say I have this great book, it's called A Geobibliography of Anomalies. It's all oddities. It goes all through 50 states of the United States of America and the Canadian provinces. This guy came out in 1980. It's a tome, I mean, look at the size of this. And it chronicles all kinds of paranormal things, UFO things, anything that falls through the crack kind of stuff. And this book contains falls of frogs, salamanders, and snakes. So for us herp people, it's kind of interesting. But the reign of flightless animals has been reported throughout history. Even Pliny the Elder documented storms of frogs and fish. And then in 1794, French soldiers allegedly saw toads fall from the sky. And Charles Fort, who was sort of like a guy like this guy, Charles Fort was a guy who consolidated all kinds of paranormal or fringe type things into 4 books. He died in 1932. He chronicles a case of raining snakes in Massachusetts. He says Hawthorne, but there's a subsection I think of Beverly that's Hathorne. I couldn't find a Hawthorne, Mass. But I'd be curious to see where he got his source. And there was supposedly a case in Plymouth, Mass. I think it was the summer of 1926, where someone said it rained frogs too. But like I said, it's always anecdotal. Someone sees them in the gutters. We're not really sure. Nobody actually, there's no videotape, you know. But just to show you that these things are still happening or an ongoing thing, here's an old woodcut. Shows you how far back it goes. And then I came across in my research for you guys some recent ones in Japan, 2009, and then Hungary and in Uruguay. So
Yeah.
too bad nobody took a video. But it was reported in a paper, and it said sky rains tadpoles over Japan. And it said that basically it was it happened. People were trying to attribute it to winds or crows or different things, but I mean it's a kind of interesting story. It sounds a little bit involved. Dead tadpole downpours were also reported by local officials 48 hours later, so 2 days later, in the city of, I'm not sure how to say that, Hakusan, in the same prefecture. So it's interesting, it's just interesting. If you do Google it, you can still find some cases that aren't from 1794, that evidently are more recent and probably everything in between. So I did put this next one, we're a little bit out of order in terms of animals, but I found like an old woodcut or some kind of drawing of a snake rainfall too. As I mentioned, Charles Fort talked about it. Another interesting thing in sort of paranormal fringe thing is this idea of entombed frogs, entombed animals. And this one's probably a hoax from, I believe it's from England. And maybe some of these cases, what happens is we know like toads and salamanders and things like to get in hollows, and sometimes maybe get themselves in a situation where they die in there and then someone thinks that they came out of there. Or maybe they were living and someone cut down a tree and it comes out and they think that it's been there forever. It's really strange because it makes zero sense, yet it's repeatedly happened in history. So it doesn't make any sense. It's dismissed by mainstream science, obviously, but it has remained a topic of interest to Fortean researchers. That's who I was referencing, Charles Fort. The adjective term Fortean now has been applied to his name. Fortean phenomena is sort of all this stuff. It's all that sort of fringe stuff. But it's interesting. I don't know if any of you have seen the cartoon where Michigan J. Frog is stuck. Does anybody remember that? He was stuck in like a box when they opened up the cornerstone. They're demolishing a building or something, and he's in a box, and then he gets out and he starts singing. Yeah, come on, my baby. He starts singing, and then the guy thinks he's gonna make $1 million, so he brings the frog like in front of everywhere, and the frog starts croaking and acting normal like a regular frog again. And at the end of the, I don't know if I'm ruining it, but at the end of the story, after he goes crazy and loses everything, and he's like destitute, gets out of, I think, a psych hospital and stuff, he takes the frog in the box and he puts it into a new building, like they're putting up a new building, he sticks it in the cornerstone so that some future person, and then they show the future, like 25 something, 80 years something, this guy with a laser beam is taking down a building, so it's supposed to be this endless cycle of getting deceived by a frog. But I think it's funny that this folkloric thing about the toad in the hole even made it into like the Merry Melody cartoon here, and he became a character, and then he became the symbol for the WB, TV. Yeah, so Michigan J. Frog, 1955. And there's this other, I'm switching just different gears within frogs here and stuff, but there's this notion of, and you've probably seen old pictures where dragons, sometimes snakes, and frogs and toads will have like a jewel on their head. And I always used to wonder what that was when you look at like little fairy tale books and stuff. When I was a kid, I'd see that, and I just thought it was like he was a prince or something. But it sort of had this idea of, getting, and this old woodcut shows it, this idea of, that I think it's like the paradox type thing, like these lowly creatures have wisdom. And I don't mean low, I'm just saying lowly, I know you guys don't think they're lowly, but I mean these lesser things, snakes and toads and things, have wisdom. And this old woodcut shows that. It's kind of a neat picture. So I'm gonna go kind of quick because I don't know how long we're supposed to do, like 40 minutes or something.
Whatever you would like to do.
There's like 69 slides, so I'll try to go to good little clips so you're not here all day. Salamanders. Nice right after that. And what I found out, again, is these animals, lizards, salamanders, it was really tough to kind of nail some of these things down because they're complex, and different books and different websites I would read there was some commonality, like snakes with rebirth, but a lot of them were kind of complex and in different websites and different books would give different answers to what the symbolism of certain creatures would be. So because salamanders can, do their regenerate tails and things, they're sometimes seen as a symbol of regeneration, nighttime. And it's interesting because they're a water, tadpoles, they're born in water, but yet they're a symbol of fire, of the elemental fire. And they're a complex symbol, as I said, as most of these things are. And it's really interesting. That's a European fire salamander, which ties into the next slide. There was this whole notion that salamanders, in the old times, like in Europe stuff, that people thought salamanders were born of fire. And it was because I think, people bring logs in to heat their houses, especially when you use logs for like everything back then, and cooking and staying warm and things like that. And so they'd bring a log or two in from outside, and these salamanders would crawl out of the fireplace naturally. They wouldn't want to be there very long. And somehow this, I don't know why anybody couldn't, this is pre-science, but nobody could figure out that they were coming out because, they didn't want to be burned. And so the salamander is an amphibian which, as with many real creatures, often has been ascribed fantastic and sometimes occult qualities by pre-modern authors that are not possessed by the real organism. The legendary salamander is usually depicted as a typical salamander shape, sometimes with a lizard-like form, but it's usually ascribed with an affinity to fire, especially elemental fire. And that's an old 1617 illustration. And there are quite a few of these. If you Google these, there's all kinds of pictures of salamanders through fire. And then, as my dad was here last month, was saying, they have that thing they call salamander where you can burn things in. Just give them its name. And if you read the book Fahrenheit 451, they tie in the salamander symbolism with the fire department. Salamanders are a cool thing. And I didn't get into it. You can't get into you can't do everything. But the whole idea of newts and magic and stuff like that, didn't quite get that into this lecture, but maybe in 3 years I'll come back and add to it. Turtles and tortoises. Good old Eastern box turtle. Turtles are often an auspicious, lucky animal, symbolizing good luck, and symbolize naturally long life because turtles and tortoises tend to live long, especially those tortoises. Wisdom and peace. It's sometimes linked to fertility in Mother Earth symbolism. And the thing about reptiles and amphibians, here's kind of a general thing, a lot of them associated with fertility because they have clutches of eggs. They don't have like an offspring or two, most of them, they have tons. You think of tadpoles, you think of a clutch of sea turtle eggs, whatever, it means quite a few. So, like many animals, you think of like the goat's a fertility symbol, the rabbit for sure. A lot of reptiles I noticed in my researches were it said symbolizes fertility, whether it's a turtle or snakes or whatever, or frogs and amphibians. The thing that I found interesting, and I got into this the last time, is this whole idea of the world turtle. And the world turtle is this concept that finds its way in a few mythologies around the world. I believe it's in India, China, and some Native American mythologies. And what it is the idea of, here's a sort of Native American, someone did a drawing, a painting, and had the Native American colors in the center. But it's the idea that the world is supported by a turtle. And I believe I can say with some accuracy that some Wampanoag traditions have almost like a Noah's Ark kind of story, in that where Noah got all the different species together into an ark, that there was a primeval like grandmother turtle, snapping turtle or something, and that the grandmother muskrat went down in the flood and got some earth and kind of spat it on the back of the turtle, and then all the creatures could live through the flood. So it's interesting the Wampanoag have this flood myth too. But the world turtle is this idea of support. And in other cultures they have, what was the other one? Oh, the world elephant. So this idea of like, 4 elephants like pillars. And I think that because one of the things to do with symbolism of turtles is strength. Like a lot of reptiles, they're strong. Snakes and certain crocodilians and stuff, they're very strong. And turtles, they're 4-legged, they're stout, and they're strong, so they could be like pillars. And I have this one, from sort of a Native American type look, and then here's one more of an Indian type, came out of a book, with the 4 world elephants on the back of the turtle, and the elephants are supporting the globe. And this gets into an idea. Here's another version of a pillow type thing. But this gets into an idea of if the turtle's holding up the world, sort of what's holding up the turtle. And I got into this last time too. The idea of turtles all the way down. And what that is this. This is the first reference I could find. There was a similar idea expressed, but about rocks. Someone was saying there's a rock it's holding up the world, and oh, well, what's under that rock? Bigger rock, you know. But the earliest one I could find where it really mentioned turtles was this Reverend Berg, which came after the one about stones. My opponent's reasoning reminds me of the heathen, who, being asked on what the world stood, replied, on a tortoise. But on what does the tortoise stand? On another tortoise. And it's turtles all the way down. And that gets into some, and we're not going to really like go crazy into this part, but when you get into problems of logic and it's almost into like philosophy and study of like the beginning of things, there's this idea of infinite regress. So it's cut off a little bit, but it's like, why does proposition 1 hold? Well, and each one is supported. You'd never get to the end of it. It just keeps going ad infinitum. So it's turtles all the way down is an expression of the problem in philosophy of infinite regress. The saying alludes to the mythological idea of a world turtle that supports the earth on its back. And it suggests that this turtle rests on the back of an even larger turtle, which itself is part of a column of increasingly large turtles that continues indefinitely. That is, turtles all the way down. References to the saying's mythological antecedents, the world turtle and its counterpart, the world elephant, were made by a number of authors in the 17th and 18th centuries. This mythology is frequently assumed to have originated in ancient India and other Hinduist beliefs. So that probably could be a discussion on itself. But we're going to move on to crocodilians. Crocodilians. So the symbolism, amongst other things, crocodiles can symbolize courage, strength, as I mentioned, honor, patience, vigilance, speed, fear, deceit, cunning, and primal power. And in Egypt, of course, one of the oldest civilizations we know of, they had this god Sobek, I believe you pronounce it. He was an ancient Egyptian deity with a rather complex and fluid nature, and even the internet kind of alluded that it said it was complex. He's associated with the Nile crocodile or the West African crocodile, and is represented either in its form as an actual animal or as an animal with a crocodile head. He was associated with pharaonic power, fertility, and military prowess, but served additionally as a protective deity with there's a word I do not know how to say. What that word means, though, is like something that would ward off evil influences. Like the idea of something that wards off the evil eye, like a charm, like a lucky charm. So it had proper qualities of protection. Invoked particularly for protection against the dangers presented by the Nile. And he was kind of a cool-looking god in the Egyptian pantheon. Sobek. Now then there's this idea, this is not mythology really, but the idea of a cultural idiom or whatever, or a phrase, the idea of crocodile tears. And crocodile tears, I guess, go way back even to maybe Roman times. Crocodile tears, or superficial sympathy, is a false, insincere display of emotion, such as a hypocrite crying fake tears of grief. And it derives from an ancient belief that crocodiles shed tears while consuming their prey, or that crocodiles would cry to get you near them, and then makes them, like an animal or a person, feel sorry for them or something, and get them over their zone to be attacked and devoured. So it derives from an ancient belief that crocodiles shed tears while consuming their prey, and as such is present in many modern languages, especially in Europe, where it was introduced through Latin. While crocodiles, like us, do have tear ducts, they weep to lubricate their eyes. Typically, they've been out of water for a time, and their eyes begin to dry out. However, evidence suggests this could also be triggered by feeding, and that's pretty much been shown to be true. There's a Bogorad syndrome in humans, I guess, which causes sufferers to shed tears while consuming food, and this has been labeled the crocodile tear syndrome with reference to the legend. I don't know why we don't say, you know, hedgehog tears or, you know, other animals, but we all know this phrase, don't, you know, and you say it to people, don't shed crocodile tears over that, you know. So somehow deceit or insincerity has been sort of given the crocodile has gotten that attribute or whatever amongst his other more positive attributes. But I thought this was funny because people are still making little cartoons and things about it. We still use that phrase to this day. Oh, I think what it was about proving it, what I meant to say was, down in Florida, they had, I think, 7 caiman that they were feeding on land, and they were able to show that when these, at least 5 out of the 7 caiman, while they were eating, shed tears, and it might have to do with the puffing and the sort of some respiratory things they do while they were eating, and kind of maybe blowing up some of the tear ducts and stuff like that. So there might be a truth to that old thing that probably goes all the way back to Rome or whatever, about that they cry while they eat their prey, or, you know, the victim. How about the old gator in the sewer legends? You guys all know that too, right? And the funny part about that is that there occasionally have been alligators pulled out of sewers, and I think as far back as the 20s or 30s that there were some kids in, like, I think New York City or something, and they were shoveling ice down down to the sewer or something, to a little sluiceway or whatever, and they saw something alive in there, and they pulled out like a little crocodilian out of there, and it happens. It's happened a few times I think in New York City proper, and it's happened happens where they do belong more, like in Florida and stuff, where there's storm drains and different things and they can get in there. But one of the things about it happening is, as you all know, is that it gets transmorgified into this big thing, like where they become like albinos, and they're mutants, and they've been eating sludge or something, and I'm not sure about all that part of the story, obviously, but Hollywood likes it because they made a movie in 1980 called Alligator, and Alligator was set in Chicago, and it follows a police officer and a reptile expert tracking a giant murderous sewer gator. I've got to check this out now that I've found it. And in other popular culture stuff, if you know the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, there was Leatherhead. So the idea of the gator and but I think it's interesting that it actually literally happened. It isn't just totally made up, and it actually came from an incident that actually happened. So how about we move on to lizards? Aww. I thought you guys would like that picture. I knew I was in the right place. Oh, not selling insurance or anything. Let's see, again, I'm going to say it, I keep repeating myself, sorry, but lizards are rather complex symbolically, and when I looked into it, I couldn't really get easy, straight answers. They're treated differently depending on the culture. Some places around the world say the lizard's a good omen, and some say it's a bad omen. And as I mentioned last time, I think there are places in Africa, where they see a chameleon, a true chameleon, he's like killed on sight. But lizards that can change their color, like the chameleon, could symbolize change or mutability, or something that's able to adapt or transition, transformation. I did find some stuff out about Native American cultures, that lizards play positive roles in the folklore of many Native American tribes. The Plains Indians, lizards are associated with healing and survival, and also with masculinity. In some Plains tribes, a newborn baby's umbilical cord is sewn into an amulet, the shape of a lizard, to ensure his health and strength. Today, many Cheyenne still consider it bad luck to kill a lizard. In the mythology of some California Indian tribes, such as the Pomo, lizard, the character, was one of the major figures of creation, who made humans partially in his image. And I think you can see that when you see a lizard, and especially I did last time about the frog, about how he sort of prefigures the human more than most animals. If you hold a frog upright, he's got the 2 arms, he's got the 2 longer legs, he's got a head up top. I mean, he sort of prefigures a human shape more than other lower creatures. And lizards, so evidently the Indians saw it this way too about a lizard, because, well, with the exception of the tail, but if you hold the lizard up, he does have a similar body plan too. In southwestern tribes, horned lizards are considered sacred medicine animals. The Gila monster features as a powerful hero in the Navajo and other southwestern legends. In other tribes, lizards are associated with protection, especially of children, prosperity, renewal, and good luck. Lizards are used as clan animals in some Native American cultures, and tribes with lizard clans include the Hopi and the Pueblo. So now we're going to move on to snakes. Nice picture of a rainbow boa. So snakes, I put them for last because I love all reptiles and stuff, but I think they're my favorite a little bit. I was, as a kid, was really into snakes and catching snakes. And so, symbolism of snakes. Well, I think they're a complex thing, but one of the main things you know about is that they are represent fertility or creative life force. And you can see that in a sense because I think primitive peoples would have seen snakes as sort of free-floating phallic symbols. They're sort of shaped like that from a Freudian viewpoint. And also, with regeneration and stuff, because they shed their skin, they are symbols of rebirth, transformation, immortality, and healing. And speaking of immortality, or more infinity really, the Ouroboros is an ancient symbol depicting a serpent or a dragon eating its own tail. And it's interesting, the Ouroboros is in a lot of different parts of the world. I mean, I tend to think of it as a Greek thing, but it says it's ancient Egyptian, and then I saw a book on Native American art, and there was a picture of a snake eating its tail in that too. So it's one of these things that's not just in one particular culture, it's kind of like an archetype. It's an ancient symbol depicting a serpent or dragon eating its own tail. Originating in ancient Egyptian iconography, the Ouroboros entered Western tradition via Greek magical tradition, and it was adopted as a symbol in Gnosticism and Hermeticism, and most notably in alchemy, the transmutation of base metals into gold. The term derives from ancient Greek, and it symbolizes eternity, renewal, and self-generation. I figured you guys would like this picture. It's an infinity symbol, reptile style. The Ouroboros is a kind of cool symbol. So about the snake dance, I think we did this 2-3 years ago, I mentioned the snake dance. In some cultures, as I said, snakes were a fertility symbol. For example, the Hopi people of North America performed an annual snake dance to celebrate the union of snake youth and snake girl and to renew the fertility of nature. During the dance, live snakes were handled, and at the end of the dance, the snakes were released into the fields to guarantee good crops. The snake dance is a prayer to the spirits of the clouds, the thunder and the lightning, that the rain may fall on the growing crops. And this is an actual old photo of an actual ritual. I'm not sure what year that is, but it looks like kind of it goes back a ways, I think. I'm guessing like 1910 or something like that. I think it's really early. It's kind of cool to find a picture. But you know, snake handling is still alive and well. And there are certain Christian branches down south that practice the taking up of serpents. And I think it's just because of a sentence or two in the Bible which says, "Thou shalt take up serpents and drink poison and be fine." So these people have really taken it to the nth degree. Yeah. And to the point of even getting bitten and stuff like that, and dying, some of them. But this is an older picture, but it still goes on, and I'll show you a more recent picture. But I like this picture right here. And as a side note, I play music as one of my hobbies, play percussion and keyboards. This looks like a fun band. I'd like to jam with these guys. I don't know what they're doing, what they're playing, but it looks like a good time.
Yeah, I've actually seen that in West Virginia. I went to school at Ohio University, and there was a pastor from West Virginia who used to come with snakes to campus. And we don't know if he actually allowed himself to get bitten. The theory was that he became immune over time after being bitten repeatedly by rattlesnakes.
Can you build up? I wonder if you can do that.
So
You can.
yeah. So it was a faith-based traveling show, and they did like revival tents also. But he used to come to the campus to proselytize, and he'd stand on the street corner where the college gate was every second or third Thursday of the month, And
With
I
the
first saw that and I was like, what the?
I bet you, with
No, for real.
rattlesnake.
With real rattles, and he had told other people, you know, if you wanna test your faith, come on up.
I'm surprised he wasn't stopped.
That's fine, right
I
where
was
you are,
surprised
it's
he wasn't
okay.
stopped.
But part of his thing was that he would allow himself to be bitten, and you'd see the blood dripping from his fingers, and he would say, you know, I am full of faith, and those who believe the serpent's venom will not
Yeah.
kill you.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
There was an
Wow,
article, I think there
that's-
was an article in National Geographic about
That's
this a
cool.
while ago.
That's cool to talk to somebody who actually saw it firsthand.
I was horrified.
Yeah, yeah. One of the pictures, I didn't put it in here, but one of the pictures showed somebody, and I'm not sure, it was obviously recent, I mean, within the past 10 years and stuff, and it was somebody who he had blood all over his shoulders and been bitten, and then he died. He died, so I'm sure it happens, but to build
Yeah,
this up.
last year, the head of one of those churches down here in Kentucky that
Right,
handles snakes,
Yeah.
West Virginia,
he gets
Appalachia.
dead, he's dead.
That
This
might be
snake
the
didn't
picture
do
I saw.
him no good.
That might have been the picture I saw, yeah, because it was a fairly
It's,
recent thing.
it's still it's a common practice.
Yeah, I have a the right there, more recent picture of color and, yeah. Yeah. Interesting thing, to kind of a confluence of herpetology and faith-based religion. One of the things I wanted to tell you guys is, I didn't realize this until 3 years ago, I did the first talk for you folks, is that two-headedness in animals, the most common animals are snakes and turtles. And so it's interesting that bicephalic animals, the reptiles are the most common. I mean, there are two-headed calves, and even sometimes it's rare for birds, I think, but it does happen once in a while. But yeah, I was always kind of intrigued, you know, as a kid, you'd read a book like Ripley's Believe It or Not and have a picture like this,
Yeah.
you know.
Oh, so cute.
Two-headed cobra. I thought it was kind of a cool picture. I don't know how that person's holding them, right? Because they're venomous from at birth, right? I mean, let's say hatch. Faith, cobra handling, faith-based cobra handling. And then there was some things in the newspaper, like in Arkansas, there was a two-headed rattler. And then, did anybody see last month at the end of the month?
Two-headed copperhead.
Two-headed copperhead in Virginia, and it was a northern copperhead. It looked like one you'd see in the Blue Hills.
And there's a traveling freak show that they've done some TV episodes. They have a two-headed bearded dragon that's doing very well.
Oh,
It's,
wow.
you know, it's a good size now, so it's not a baby anymore. It's, you know, probably full grown by now.
That's
I don't know
cool.
how old it is, but, you know,
That's
hopefully
cool.
it lives forever.
I think that someone's trying to, maybe some herpetologist is trying to take care of that copperhead too. I think they gave it to
Yeah.
somebody who knows how to. Because one head might have the dominance, and sometimes what happens, I guess, is one head will have dominance, but the other one maybe was born with a better esophageal system so it's kind of rough stuff, because this snake is more dominant, the head's more dominant, and this side is the side you really should feed. So maybe that's the reason why they don't last much in nature, besides, you know, being attacked by hawks and things or whatever they get attacked by. But I always had, as you can tell when I mentioned sort of this paranormal stuff as an interest of mine, that's a whole different side thing, but two-headed snakes would sort of, as a kid, with like Ripley's Believe It or Not and that kind of stuff, kind of, you know, besides liking snakes, I often kind of like the unusual ones like this. I mentioned last time a lot, I don't think I'll get into it as long as this time, but because of time constraints, but the Greek god Hermes, I mentioned in the last talk, you know, he holds the CADUCEUS, and he made the lyre from a tortoise shell and some cattle gut or something. So he's got an association with snakes through the CADUCEUS, and also with turtles. And actually, his Roman equivalent, Mercury, one of his symbols that's with him, besides a purse, because they're a money god, they're a commerce god, is the tortoise. And I think the reason that the tortoise would be associated with somebody like a Mercury is, again, that idea of the union of opposites or duality, like a yin-yang symbol, because Hermes or Mercury is incredibly fast, so it's kind of funny or ironic almost to the, you know, the antithesis, where you'd have a tortoise being one of the symbols. Yeah, Mercury has a rooster as a symbol because of vigilance or being a herald, and the tortoise. But the Greek god Hermes, yeah, he holds the CADUCEUS, which is a magic wand, and what's interesting about the CADUCEUS is that we really in America have kind of messed it up a little bit. And what I mean by that is that The caduceus is a traditional symbol of Hermes, as you know, and it features two snakes winding around an often winged staff. But it's often mistakenly used as a symbol of medicine instead of the rod of Asclepius, especially in the US. The two-snake design has ancient and consistent associations with Hermes associations: trade, eloquence, negotiation, alchemy, wisdom, thievery, lying, and the passage into the underworld. These are all things that, as I mentioned last time, Hermes, out of all the Greek gods, even his father Zeus, Hermes has the most attributes. He's the god of public speaking. He's the god of wrestlers. It's unbelievable how broad Hermes is. Everyone thinks of him as the messenger of the gods, but that's tip of the iceberg stuff. He's the god of travelers. We use words to this day that relate to his Roman version. For instance, we have the word commerce, merchant, merchandise, market, mercenary. All these words with the M-E-R-C words come from Mercury. And Mercury is the Roman version of Hermes. And I think reason why he would be, when you have trade and you have, say, like thievery and lying, because, so these are positive and negative connotations of the same thing. In other words, if I worked in the marketplace and you come to buy something, I could be a good salesperson, but if I want to con you, or if you're trying to con me, so Hermes is sort of on both sides of the equation. He's on good speech and lying speech, He's sort of really an interesting god. And you'll see, I'll show you in a minute the rod of Asclepius, which is close to this, but it's not the exact same thing. One of the things I learned in my talk to you guys is that the caduceus goes back, it's pre-Greek. I always think of it as being a Greek thing, but this is something from a Sumerian caduceus, and I also found one in India. And that's pre-Greek, that's really old. So this idea of this sort of intertwined serpents around a central staff, some people see ideas of kundalini force, of yoga type thing, the base of the spine and stuff. Other people, the DNA spiral. It's kind of interesting how the ancients kind of touched upon these things in pre-scientific times. But I was excited to learn that Caduceus goes that far back to Sumerian times. Now, the actual rod of Asclepius, which is the actual symbol of healing, you will see if you look at an ambulance go by, it'll have a blue kind of asterisk-looking thing with the accurate rod of Asclepius. That's the actual symbol of healing. And I think what happened is in World War II, they began to be intertwined. People started using the caduceus as a symbol for healing in World War II, and it just grew. And even if you go by medical buildings right down the street here, you go by a medical building or a dentist, and it has the caduceus, and that's actually technically inaccurate. This is actually a symbol of healing. So the rod of Asclepius, known as the staff of Asclepius, is a serpent-entwined rod wielded by the Greek god Asclepius, a deity associated with healing. The symbol has continued to be used in modern times, where it is associated with medicine and healthcare, yet frequently confused with the staff of the god Hermes, the caduceus. And by now, it's almost like we've used it so long, the caduceus is a symbol for healing too. But if it was really want to be accurate, it's not. Something I mentioned last time about snakes in the Bible. There's Aaron's rod when he was with Moses, and he threw down the Egyptian magicians had rods, they turned into snakes or something. Or first I think maybe Aaron did, and then the Egyptian magicians imitated his behavior. But his snake ate their snakes, showing that the God of Moses, the monotheistic Yahweh, Big Daddy God, was more powerful than their Egyptian gods or whatever. Actually, snakes in reptiles and amphibians appear in the Bible a couple times. Sometimes like a plague of frogs. Sometimes they're not good. The Nagas. Anybody familiar with the Nagas in India?
Yeah.
These are like snake gods that. This itself could be a whole talk, I'm sure. But it's really interesting. They have festivals and stuff, and they round up cobras and things. The Naga is a Sanskrit word which refers to a serpent, especially the king cobra. The term Naga in Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism denotes divine, semi-divine deities, or a semi-divine race of half-human, half-serpent beings that resides in a heavenly netherworld, and they can occasionally take human form. They are principally depicted in three forms: holy humans with snakes on their heads and necks, common serpents or as a half human, half snake being. A female naga is a nagi or nagini. I just wanted to put this picture up of cobras because I like animals that have eye spots. There are a few reptiles and amphibians that do. One's a certain frog. He has it on his back legs and he turns around when something startles him, and it looks like a big pair of eyes. I wish I got a photo of that for you maybe next time. Cobras obviously do some kind of eye spot thing. Some of them have that. And then there's actually this Burmese turtle I found that has like 4 eye spots on his back. I think he's kind of unique in the turtle world. I think he's the only one. I mean, eye spots appear in nature. They're, you know, they're a fish, and I believe owls even sometimes have things, or certain big cats. But they do appear in the reptile and amphibian worlds too. I just throw that in there as about eye spots. It's kind of a cool thing. So mythical creatures. All kinds of reptilian mythical creatures. And probably some of you know more about this than I do. The idea of the Chinese dragon, which is kind of, you know, has usually more positive attributes than the European dragon. European dragons are usually more like this, kind of scary things. Not as positive a connotation as the Chinese dragon. One of the things I thought would be a cool thing is, do you guys know about the whole wave of sea serpent reports up in North Shore in 1817? Does anybody know about this? There was a whole wave for a couple of years, like 1817 through 19 maybe, where people up in Nahant, Lynn, North Shore, Massachusetts, were seeing something, and it's really funny. They say probably over 1,000 people saw this thing or things, and there was one story I really liked. There were these people who were on a boat, and I think they were kind of affluent, and they were, you know, maybe like, you know, lawyers in town or whatever. There's, you know, well-to-do people, and they were laughing at the ignorance of the, you know, common people in the town. Like, can you believe these people so stupid, the sea serpent things? And as synchronicity would have it, as they were talking about it, somebody's like, you know, there it is, and they supposedly saw it as they were talking about it, which is a great kind of synchronicity for that to happen. But this is actually some kind of woodcut or something that was based on the Gloucester reports, I believe, or the North Shore reports, as I was mentioning. And there was this really weird thing that happened too during it, when there was this wave of sea serpent reports. The Linnaeus Society, that, you know, was, I don't think it was European, it might have been the U.S. Linnaeus Society. There were some representatives, anyways, that came to the Gloucester area to investigate, because, hey, here's this thing that might be unknown to science, and, you know, we should name it. And at the time, some local young person, I think it was a boy, found a deformed black snake, is how they described it. I don't know if it was like a black racer, or if it was maybe a water snake, you know, the water snake that was dark. But what it was that the sea serpent, you know how sea serpents sometimes have humps coming out of the water? They found, they were trying to claim that this was a baby sea serpent. And what it was like a snake with scoliosis or something. So it was kind of a funny coincidence that while the Linnaeus Society was in town and hanging out for a bit investigating that a young local person found a deformed snake that they all went, well, that's not really it, but that's cool. Yeah, sea serpents could be a talk unto themselves. I mean, between lake monsters and sea serpents and things like Loch Ness Monster and stuff. Some of which people have ascribed sort of a reptilian appearance to. In other sort of mythical creatures, I lightly touched upon this last time, but the Midgard serpent in Norse mythology is this idea of a snake that grew so large that he encircled the whole ocean and could bite his own tail. Again, another Ouroboros, kind of Norse or Nordic Ouroboros. And I thought that was kind of a cool picture. They didn't have a lot of good pictures. Most of it was like jewelry and stuff that they were showing when I looked up for the slideshow here. But it's even, you know, this idea of the Ouroboros even made its way into Norse mythology. In other mythological creatures, you have the HYDRA. And of course, this is Hercules. In one of his labors, he had to fight the HYDRA. And when he would cut off the head, it would regenerate more heads. And then he had to, I believe, burn them. He had someone help him burn the heads as he cut them off so they wouldn't regenerate. All kinds of, the Greeks really got into this stuff, you know, they had the Titans, which had serpent legs, they had Medusa with her hair of snakes. Her stare could, her gaze could turn people to stone. Whole other thing, but just something to think about, is this idea of sort of reptilian aliens, that people who have seen UFOs or allegedly had contact with various beings. I mean, you know the famous grays, little ones, gray, big dark eyes. And then some people have sort of what they call a Nordic experience, which looks like, you know, kind of almost like a Viking guy or gal, kind of big, tall, Scandinavian looking person with blonde hair. This is typical more in the 50s, I think. But some people have had experiences with almost insectoid or reptilian aliens, allegedly. And I just wanted to put this picture in as just, it's sort of like modern mythology, or modern folklore, I guess. But it's just towards the tail end of the talk here, I thought I'd just throw that in there for you guys. Something to think about. It's not really proper mythology, but it's an interesting concept. Some people believe that that maybe, one of the things I was reading was that maybe that certain reptilians sort of went underground, like in a hollow earth thing, and have evolved on their own little track, and they've sort of become like this, you know, bipedal and upright, and that maybe they're kind of a sinister race. Of, like the tall Nordic ones are all kind of like here to help mankind, maybe, and the reptilian ones are a little bit sinister or cold-blooded. So one thing I wanted to show you is, if you're interested in learning more about this, I just found this book yesterday. There's a book that really touches upon all of this. Eye of Newt and Toe of Frog, Adder's Fork and Lizard's Leg, the lore and mythology of amphibians and reptiles. So if you're interested in this kind of stuff, I'm going to try to find this book now that I just discovered it. So should be an interesting read. It's all about this kind of same stuff. And I wanted to thank you for your time and patience and coming back from last month. And I'm glad we didn't have any technical glitches. So, any questions?
Super.
I have one, going back to the Jewel of Wisdom
Yeah.
from the animal's head. You know, I think that might have anything to do with that pineal gland or the third eye that reptiles are.
You know what? I didn't think of that. That's a great notion.
That's
Yeah.
the first thing I thought of.
That is.
So when you do more research to come back to the
Yes.
next
Yes.
one,
Well,
see
what's
if
that?
there's-
What's that thing? That's a great idea, because what's that animal that's I don't know how you say it. It's lizard shaped.
Tuatara.
Tuatara?
How do you say it?
Tuatara.
Tuatara.
There's the only one species on
He's
that.
in his own little branch,
Yeah,
right? But he's
yeah.
very lizard shaped.
Yes.
If you saw him and you weren't a science person, you'd
It's
say
a
it's a
lizard.
lizard.
Yeah, they're ancient wizards.
Very,
Yeah.
very. And he has a third kind of eye, right? It's
Yeah.
like light
I
sensitive.
think more than the others
Iguanas
do.
have it too.
Yeah.
A lot of different, agamids mostly
The
have
iguanas
it.
have
Yeah.
that same thing.
Yeah.
That is a great.
Yeah.
That might have led to all that.
That's
Isn't
what I
it?
was wondering.
Yeah, I never even thought of that. It's a great connection. Anybody else? Well, thanks again, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.